On the morning of April 19, 1775, in the quiet Massachusetts town of Lexington, a single gunshot shattered the calm. No one knows who fired it. No record identifies the shooter. Yet that mysterious crack of musket fire would echo across continents and centuries. It became known as the shot heard around the world, the spark that ignited the American Revolutionary War and changed the course of global history. In the years leading up to that morning, tension between the American colonies and Great Britain had been steadily rising. Britain, burdened by debt after the 7 Years' War, imposed new taxes on the colonies, including the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. To the colonists, these laws were an outrage. They were being taxed by a parliament in which they had no representation. Protests spread, boycotts were organized, and colonial resistance hardened into defiance. Massachusetts became the center of unrest. Boston, in particular, was under virtual military occupation after events like the Boston Massacre in 1770 and the Boston Tea Party in 1773. British troops patrolled the streets, and resentment simmered on both sides. In response to colonial resistance, British authorities decided to strike at the heart of rebellion by seizing colonial weapons stored in the nearby town of Concord. On the night of April 18, 1775, British Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith led around 700 regular troops out of Boston under cover of darkness. Their mission was to march to Concord, destroy military supplies, and arrest prominent colonial leaders. But the colonists were ready. Thanks to an efficient network of riders, most famously Paul Revere, news of the British advance spread rapidly through the countryside. By dawn, about 70 colonial militiamen, known as Minutemen, assembled on Lexington Green. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and tradesmen, armed with muskets and driven by a determination to defend their rights. They did not seek a battle. Their orders were to stand their ground and show resistance, not to provoke bloodshed. As the British troops entered Lexington, tension filled the air. British Major John Pitcairn ordered the militiamen to disperse. The Minutemen hesitated. Then suddenly, a shot rang out. No one knows whether it came from a nervous colonist, a British soldier, or even a bystander. What is certain is what followed. British soldiers fired a volley, killing 8 colonists and wounding several others. The survivors scattered, and the British continued their march toward Concord. At Concord's North Bridge, the conflict escalated. Colonial militia from surrounding towns had gathered in larger numbers. This time, when shots were exchanged, the British were forced to retreat. For the first time, American colonists had stood their ground and pushed back the most powerful army in the world. What followed was not a single battle, but a running fight. As British troops marched back toward Boston, colonial fighters ambushed them from behind stone walls, trees, and houses. By the time the British reached safety, nearly 300 of their soldiers were dead, wounded, or missing. The war had begun. News of the fighting spread quickly throughout the colonies and across the Atlantic. What had started as a protest against taxes and policies had become an armed revolution. Farmers took up arms, militias mobilized, and colonial leaders realized there was no turning back. Within months, the Continental Congress would form an army and appoint George Washington as its commander. The phrase "the shot heard around the world" later appeared in Ralph Waldo Emerson's 1837 poem Concord Hymn. But the meaning went far beyond poetry. The single unidentified shot marked the moment when ordinary people challenged imperial authority and won. It did not just change America. The American Revolution inspired movements for liberty across Europe, Latin America, and beyond. The idea that a people could overthrow a powerful empire and govern themselves reshaped political thought worldwide. No one knows who pulled the trigger that morning in Lexington, but its echo is still heard in every nation that values freedom, self-rule, and the courage to resist tyranny.